Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second semester, and I hope you're also very excited as I am to get going with the lectures again and getting back to work. I saw that you guys are coming back for the month of September, so I was informed about the program and so on. So I'll still communicate to you via the announcement board, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again. Just a note on our previous lecture, I noted that I would have posted some work during August that unfortunately didn't materialize. I have to apologize for that. There's a couple of other things that cropped up, administrative things, so I do apologize for that. But we'll go through the work. Our first section of the semester is basically theory work, so it's not too much work, but we'll go through it and we'll see how much we'll get through it. And we'll also have some face-to-face lectures as well during the month of September, so I'm looking forward to getting involved with that as well. So first thing is, I want to give you some feedback on your assignments. You probably all saw that the feedback on your assignments. There was a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight to you. Thank you for everyone for submitting, and I see there was some effort that went into it, although I also saw in some cases where there could have been a little bit more emphasis on certain areas or so, but under circumstances, all in all, I think everyone did very well. But a few things that I just want to highlight is, for instance, the first point: the contractor is not part of the professional team. Please bear that in mind. The professional team is the consultants, mostly people involved with the design. The contractors may become part of the professional team, but it's usually in the case of if you've got, for instance, plumbing, where you have a design and build of that design. So then they usually work hand in hand with the consultants who actually works on the design. Okay. The contractor is a little bit more loosely involved with the professional team. Okay. Then looking at the historical data, many of you had good calculations of the new building cost, and also used previous projects, which was what I was actually looking for, but it wasn't shown how the rates were derived from this historical data. So I found that a little bit lacking. Even your rough work you could have included as annexures or so that was something that I wanted to see a little bit more, but all in all, there was wanted to actually scrutinize the previous data quite well. So difference between the civil and the structural engineer, this was with most of the tasks. I saw that the difference between the civil engineer and the structural engineer wasn't very or wasn't comprehended that much. Just note that a civil engineer is mostly involved with the water, the stormwater, the layout. They do all the services towards any development. So those are the civil engineers. They look at the flows of the sewage, and they look at the water pressures, they look at the site layout and so on, whereas the structural engineer looks at the design and the structural integrity of the actual building. They look specifically at bending moments and what amount of steel should be included in the foundations and all the structural items of any structure. So please take note of that. That's very important for you to know, especially if you go into practice. You need to know that a structural engineer won't help you much with water flows and so on. So please just be aware of that. Okay, then the health and safety consultants is becoming more and more important. Please take note of that even though we didn't speak about the health and safety consultants, the health and safety consultants is becoming more important as legislation keeps on improving on this side. Okay, then getting to many of you using the ACOM report for your historical data. I saw that you used that for your new building cost, but what I didn't see with most of you that use that data is the scrutinization of that data, because there's a rate given for this for residential buildings and the construction thereof, but it's not scrutinized what's really included in it. So for instance, the parking area you can separate from your building, your patios can be separated as well. Did it include VAT? Did it include your external works? Did it didn't that rate usually doesn't include connection fees and so on. Just be aware of that, that the rate given there, what does it include? Just read it a little bit further down in the report. It actually says what's included, what's not included. And also adjustments to that. Anything more additional, like for instance, if you've got a building that has a little bit lower end finishes, and whether it's in Bloemfontein, when was this report given? Does the rate really does it have to be escalated, and etc. etc. So just be aware of that. I saw that there could have been a little bit more effort put into the scrutinization of this data. Okay, and then something that I want to speak to you about, it's not really too much applicable to your class, but we just had a couple of incidences of one or two of our other classes. It's plagiarism. Just be aware, if you copy and paste sections from a source, even if you do reference that, but you don't amend the words that you copy and pasted, it's still plagiarism. So please be aware of that. What should happen is, if you've got a source, you need to interpret it and write it in your own words for it not to be plagiarism. So a very important point, although like I said, it's not too applicable to you guys. I didn't see much of that. There was maybe one or two little sections of one of the students, but nothing major. Okay, then another thing is your tenses. Whenever you're writing a report, you always write it in the third person, and also in past continuous. You never write in future tense. You always write as if this report has been done and is still continuing. So please be mindful of that. Okay, and that's more or less the feedback on the task that I just wanted to give before I get into the lecture. So just be aware of these few points that I noted. Okay, so let's get into our work for this semester, the first one. So we ended up doing at chapters 3, 4, and 5. 5 of Maritz and Siegli. So we're left with chapter 5 of our study notes to get going. So that's the last little section of unit 3 that we're going to do today, and then from next week onwards we'll get involved with unit 4 and getting into the actual tender and also payment certificates and so on. So just to give you an idea, I've put on the timeline here for you. So it's a very basic timeline. just to show you where we currently are. So we've done our inceptions and the types of estimation methods that we use there. The same with stage 2, and so we're more or less here at the end of stage 3 going into stage 4. So we're going to look at our comprehensive estimation methods, which usually starts at the end of stage 3 and going into stage 4, where we actually get to our tender document before we actually get into our construction. So our tender document, usually we use our bills of quantities, where we try and have as accurate bills of quantities to do a tender on. And like I've mentioned before, the main objective of the bills of quantities is to have something, a document that you can actually do your payment certificates and your progress payments to your contractor on, so that you've got a nice document to measure the amount of work that has been done on site. Okay, so chapter 5 of our study notes, it's not a very long chapter. You will see, although we've discussed the elemental cost estimate, so we're going to start with our elemental estimation. We've discussed the elemental cost analysis method on elemental and component level. They are more or less the same method. The data behind it all is the same, but it's the detail, like I've mentioned before, that we're going to look at. So the application differs. That's the main thing, is with up to component level, is we're going to look at each and every component. So it's being broken down further and further. Okay, so the total elemental cost is derived from the sum of all the applicable components. Okay, there's specific units for measurement, e.g. our strip footing is measured in meters. Okay, so we'll still get into this, how this works, but basically your this meters is then broken down further in our bills of quantities into cubes, and then this specific item. So your elemental estimation, you basically measure the length of the strip footing, but in your bills of quantities, that length of strip footing is broken down further into the different elements, like the excavations, the carting away of that material, the backfill, the blinding of the concrete that has to go in, the actual concrete that goes into the strip footing, and then the building up of the brick walls in the foundation, backfill to that again, the compaction of that, etc., etc. So that is something that you need to remember, is your elemental estimation groups item like strip footing into one, and where your bills of quantities actually breaks it down even further. Okay, so I don't want to go into it too much, but you will see later on in the presentation how that works. There's a standard method of measurement. This is very important, and I'll still share the standard measurement system with you that you can use when you do your task. Okay, so the advantages of this, the elemental method up to component level, is the structures and standardized, easy to interpret by others, because it's guided by a guideline. Any person that picks up that measurement will have a rough idea, or will have an idea of where all the components came from and how it was measured. There's specific rules of how items are measured, or the components are measured. Far more accurate and design details required. and is regarded separately, and an elaborate historical unit tariff is used. So and you can use old projects, usually bills of quantities, to determine your historical rates. It is suitable for cost analysis. It shows how building costs are distributed over different building elements and how it is spent over within each of the elements, thus suitable for cost control. Very good for cost control, actually. Okay, so the advantages or disadvantages, pardon. For more, it's more time consuming. Obviously, you're now going to measure each and every component. Detailed information pertaining to all components should be available. Okay, more complicated, and not all item tariffs can be converted to units. Thus, some components, global historical components costs are needed. So you need accurate information to actually build up these rates. But what is nice about this is you can actually get new rates. For instance, you can go to builders and get the cost of a toilet and add your installation cost, add your profit, and so on. So what's nice about it is whenever you've got a new item, you can build up your rates through this. Even though it is a disadvantage because it takes more time, you can get quite accurate information like that. Okay, so the possible applications, it's time is the biggest disadvantage. By applying for it and allowing certain items of small value to be calculated together with certain components. For instance, strip footings, skirtings, tilings, etc. Like I've explained earlier, you're grouping items together to be measured. Okay, so for instance here I just added some edge trims can actually be included in your tiling. So for all floor installation. So whenever you're doing a floor installation, you will measure the specific type of floor over a square meter area, but it will include the installation, it will include the trims, it will include the cutting, etc. It will include, you can include the skirtings into that, etc. It is for processing of data and detailed sketch plans and construction drawings, and should be applied to these stages. Okay, although if combined with the component, it can be a very quick method to use, especially if you've got a template setup. It can be very quick and easy to actually do your estimation. It can be applied very early on. For instance, my experience that I've had is I've done elemental estimations without having not having much information, and then basically using a previous estimate and speaking to the architect and asking what type of finishes there should be, etc. Would it be similar to this type of development? And then from that you actually have most of the specifications already with the cost available. So you can actually do elemental estimation very early on. It just means that the design area is a little bit falls a little bit more towards the QS to actually assist with the design of the types of finishes. Okay, so that's more or less the theory on the elemental method up to component level. The next one that I'm going to talk about is the comprehensive quantities. Now, the comprehensive quantities is almost like your bills of quantities, but it is more the quantity surveyor basically uses bills of quantities, but then he groups it according to his understanding of what information he's got available, and putting a basic bill together with items, but then making allowances for the items that he doesn't have. So it's a it has a lot of items, but it doesn't reflect a true and accurate measurement of the entire building. Okay, so you have different purposes. It's cost estimation. It can be used for tender purposes. So for instance, a QS will use a old bill of a similar type of building, measure the amount of items, but it's all remeasurable, making allowances for items that might not be measured. It's usually over measured a little whenever it's used. It can be used for cost purposes. Estimation differs slightly from the elemental method on component level, in the sense that not all information is measured into exact detail. Okay, so the component amounts are mainly subdivided into item amounts and measured sections instead of elements, namely measurement sections. So if we go through that, you've got your foundations, structures, your walls, your roofs, exterior finishes, interior walls, floors, ceilings, windows, and your accessories. And the main difference here is you measure items instead of components. So you measure specific items in the bill instead of breaking them down or grouping them in your different sections together. Okay, for estimation, the following general approach is used. For estimating purposes, there is a certain way of measuring items. Quantities are calculated in detail. Items are grouped. Okay, so certain items are grouped within the previous slides groupings. Diverse items of little value is included in applicable tariffs, e.g. soil tests and shop drawings. So all of these allowances is made. Items of the same dimensions of same production are grouped together. Items of different dimensions in the same production process are grouped and measured as extra over, for instance your doors and your windows. And allowances is made for unforeseen circumstances. Okay, so the advantages is that it's more accurate based on real quantities, and thus global historical cost is less important. The costs are grouped in certain sections and suitable for cost analysis. And the quantities are determined in a structured way, standard system. Okay, so it still follows the rules of the standard system of measurement, but it doesn't follow a strict rule of dividing your measurement into different sections. Like for instance, if you've got a bills of quantities, you will have different buildings maybe on one project, or different sections of a project grouped together, whereas the comprehensive method will probably group everything together at first before actually taking it out further. Okay, so the disadvantages is the aim is calculating cost and thus time consuming. Detailed information is needed, not as structured as the elemental method, and thus difficult to establish a uniform system. To save time, shortcuts are used, mainly grouping of items. Rates have to be kept up to date constantly. Yes, so this is the disadvantages of this. So to be honest, the comprehensive method isn't used that much in practice, because it's more or less but it falls between the elemental estimation and the bills of quantities. So for instance, myself, I'll rather do an elemental estimate and then immediately jump to the bills of quantities instead of doing a comprehensive method or quantities method, because all that it means is that you have to you measure it quickly, but then you have to remeasure your the works again whenever you do your bills of quantities. So it's not a method used very often, but some QSs does, instead of using the elemental method, they use the comprehensive method, and then they use to save them time. They just either use the elemental method or the comprehensive method. Okay, so possible applications: detailed construction drawings are needed. Through grouping, it can be applied earlier. Okay, obviously you need some experience to do that. Is suitable for to complement other estimation methods. Okay. Okay, so our final method that we're going to discuss today is our accurate quantities. Now, this is your bills of quantities. Now, this is the item or the method that we get to, that we go out on tender with. So, usually, if all goes well, all the designs are done, all the finishing schedules are done, the engineers had their go at the designs. You know how the building is developed, or how it goes, and basically all of the information is available. So the QS can now go through the drawings and the designs systematically and build the structure within his head, or nowadays on Dimex, or use the model, and then put himself in the shoes of the contractor and then systematically note everything down, so that a contractor can actually price each item, and then the QS can monitor the contractor against that. Okay, so accurate bills of quantities are done for contracts with bills of quantities, so it will become a contract document, part of it. It is usually done on the standard system of measurement work. Very important, because now it becomes a legal thing. If, for instance, I say that excavations of your strip footing, for instance, does it include carting away of the excess material that's not going to be used again, or is material just worked into over the site, or what do you do with that excess material? Or another thing, for instance, hard rock. If, for instance, you have excavations, but you find that there is hard or rock that has to be either blasted or chipped away or whatever, how do we pay the contractor for that? So it's very important to know. So that's why the standard system has been developed to say how each and every item will be paid. Another example, for instance, if you install your tiling, what does it include? Does it include the grouting, or is the grouting measured separately? What width of grouting is used? Because if you've got a large quantity of tiling, and the difference between a 5mm and a 3mm grout can have a big impact on the amount of labor and the amount of grout material actually used on the project. So that type of items is governed by a standard system of measurement work. So whenever there's a difference between the contractor and the principal agent, one can go back to the standard system and see how these items are actually measured and how they actually are paid for. The exclusive purpose is to attract competitive tenders. Okay, so the bills of quantities actually gives the opportunity to for contractor to price a bill accurately. Then the price BOQ is the last estimate before the actual quotes are received, and should be very accurate. Okay, the price BOQ can be used to determine rates for other means of estimation. Okay, so for instance, your elemental estimate, whenever you've got your bills of quantities and rates priced in them, then you've got a lot of nice information that you can use on your elemental estimate again. It reflects market rates of different items in a specific period. Okay, very important. And yeah, so that's more or less the overview of the bills of quantities. In our next lecture, we're going to go into that a little bit more in detail. I'm going to show you how the bills of quantities, the columns, and the structure of bills of quantities actually works, and that will explain a little bit more on how the actual system works. So thank you everyone, and that's today's lecture, and yeah, keep well.